The United States of America and the Federation of Russia, formerly the Union Soviet Socialist Republic, have not had a pretty history. Back in 2021, the latter invaded Ukraine, an ally of the former, and before that, the USSR and the USA had waged a so-called Cold War between 1945 and 1990. But in early 2023, Alexei Navalny was elected president after an election due to the assassination of the previous president, Putin, and he is now in talks with America to provide them with the economy stuff they had lost because of sanctions by Russia. If China agrees to this trade agreement with America, then the Americans will get a major edge in the war against China. With a month of ceasefires left after the first phase of fighting in Taiwan, Colombia and Korea, this could be very decisive. Welcome to our latest episode, USA to gain an edge in war. So let's start with this massive trade agreement. Back on the 29th of November, Sergei Lavrov, trade minister and former foreign minister under Putin, but is a very clinical ally of Navalny, arrived in San Francisco and called a flight to Washington, where the next day he met with Gina Raimondo, the US Trade Secretary, and Antony Blinken, US Foreign Minister. Private talks went on for 2 days, and on the 3rd, Lavrov met with Biden. Later that day, an Alushan IL-96 300PU arrived in London, and with Alexei Navalny reportedly on board. This was confirmed when Navalny arrived in that Alushan early on the 4th. He arrived in Washington. Talks ensued between the Russians, Navalny and Lavrov, and the Americans, Biden, Raimondo and Blinken. On the 6th, Biden announced that Russia would supply the US and NATO with all the technology, equipment, oil and other things that China had cut off through sanctions. Russia was given $46 billion, which was 4 trillion and 244 billion Russian ruble. The US also gave them 20 battleships, the latter agreement done in private. Not much else happened this month except from the Chinese ferrying some troops over to Taiwan, but that we're going into next month, along with the Japanese troops arriving in Taiwan, along with some more British. As we're going into all of that next month, I won't go into much detail this month, but another major event which has happened is that Italy have said they will enter into Taiwan as a sort of intermediary, despite being part of NATO. As the Chinese don't believe them, they've actually tried to tell the Italians just to fight them, as they think it'd be easier for them not to enter the war in a later date. The Dutch have also entered into Taiwan with their troops, along with their new president, who is sort of pro-Putin, so we don't even know what's going to happen there. We also think he's pro-Qui, so possibly the Netherlands going to leave NATO and join the Chinese, which would be terrible for the US. Anyway, see you next month, and next month things get very complicated very quickly. So this is why this episode is short. So I'll see you next week.